Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
How are you doing this evening, sir?
Ah, well, it hasn't been a good week.
Oh,
Very bad memories have just impinged upon me. Um, First of all, the week had been full of the program of tributes for the Wigwe family. And the people put together the program had done an excellent job. But, when in the course of the program, um, they bring up a singer who sings, Goodbye, English Rose. It brings back memories of Diana. I was a fan of Diana, um, and I just recall circumstances of where I was when the news came. Uh, I was in an airport hotel, uh, waiting to catch an early morning flight to Cote d'Ivoire as part of my NADECO responsibility, and because it was a very early morning flight, wake up early. Of course, the first thing I always do is to turn on the television set only to hear the news. So when for the Wigways they brought somebody to sing, Goodbye English Rose, the tune. I mean, of course, the words were changed. It brought back all that memory. Sheer sadness. I'm not a member of the royal family, and she's not even a Nigerian. But it's like it's like the day I heard of the death of John F. Kennedy. I still remember where I was, you know, coming from my class on economics 101, and I was then going to my hall of residence, and I had to pass through the department of mass media. The Americans, they build separate departments for separate disciplines. And they would, it's not just theory. They practicalize what they are doing. And I just saw them putting, stamping on their window, the display window, Kennedy shot. I don't think we were more than 5 people at that time, 5 students passing by, and you just froze. You just froze. And then, latest, Royal Kennedy rushed to the hospital. And then, finally, President John F. Kennedy is dead. So you know, there are things that bring back the memory, unpleasant memory of events that shook you to your roots. And so it is that song, just brought back memories of Diana. And then wake up, this morning to hear of what Boko Haram has done. Kidnapping of over 100 women and children. And as if that was not bad enough, this afternoon, only again to hear that they have kidnapped about 200 students. And flash back to those young girls. If you will recall, I was in Abuja, serving on a committee, what we call the Boko Haram Committee, when under Jonathan, when again that news came about what was the name of that school?
Chibok girls, is that the one you're referring to?
The Chibok girls. The Chibok girls. And I mean, you could feel the tension in the room. Already we were divided between the North and the South. The North feeling that we were exaggerating things, and that in any case, we were partially responsible for what was happening. I remember having to walk out of that committee and flew back to Lagos because I felt I was insulted when one of the delegates said, "You Christians, God will judge you for what you are doing to us in the North." And it was like, what are we doing to you in the North? Are we the one who kidnapped these girls? Oh, the International Court of Justice. I just packed my bag and I left and decided I wasn't going to take part. In the deliberations, okay, it was resolved. They sent messages to me and so on. And when I came back, she apologized that she didn't mean it. It was just the way emotionally, she felt and that kind of thing. And so here, look, it's been a bad week. Let me just put it that way. At least for me, I'm an emotional person. It's been a very bad week.
Yeah, I can understand that, sir, given the context. And for the departed, may their souls rest in peace. But sir, let me take you to another case, and I hope this would probably not add to the points you've raised, depending on where you fall in terms of your response to this. But I want to start with the case of former President Trump in the United States, where the court, the Supreme Court, has unanimously overturned the decision to bar President Trump's name from being on the ballot. And now there's been rejoicing in some quarters. Others have regarded that particular situation as a major issue for democracy. And my question to you, sir, is what is your reaction to that news? And to what extent do you go back to things that someone has done and disqualify them from office because of that sort of thing? And I'd like to hear your views on that. And I'm sure that someone online here too would want to hear your take on that situation in the US.
That was the wisest decision that the Supreme Court of the United States has ever taken since the time of Chief Justice Warren. It was the only decision they could have taken. And what was the decision they took? That a state court cannot disqualify a candidate for a national position. Now, look at it put yourself in their shoes. If they had upheld the Colorado Supreme Court decision, what prevents another state that is controlled by the Republicans from now disqualifying Biden? And then another state, maybe Vermont, disqualifying Trump. And then another state, South Carolina, disqualifying Biden. So before you know it, you've got a holy mess on your hand. And so they took the decision, a wise decision, on a very narrow, you see, when a court is faced with a difficult decision, it narrows the basis of its decision, which is that a state court cannot, and a state assembly cannot disqualify a candidate for a national. You can go to Congress. Let Congress take that decision. And even though the court wasn't explicit in its decision, recall that twice Trump had been impeached, but twice he had not been convicted, because the conviction can only take place by the Senate, and he needs 2/3 vote there. If he had been convicted by the Senate, that would have settled the question, because that conviction would have meant that he could not run for a national office. But because of the number of Republican votes in the Senate, they didn't convict him. And so it is left to the Congress, if you like, to deconstruct the 14th Amendment. It's not out of the woods yet, because there are cases arising from that invasion of Congress that are still finding, working their way towards the courts, where the courts then could still decide, but it will have to be a federal court, have to decide that that invasion of Congress amounts to treason. So in a way, you know, I mean, I have been a strong critic of the American Supreme Court, but even the fact that it was 9-0, all the Democrats voted along with the Republicans on this issue shows the wisdom of the decision.
So some have talked about, and this might be maybe a broader question here, but some have talked about this universality of democratic processes and procedures, and the fact that um, you have someone who is going through this process in the courts, and that when you look at the laws that are applied, or at least the way the law is interpreted in the United States, that's meant to be that beacon of democracy, it's very different from how it's interpreted or how they expect us in the global south to interpret the same laws for our leaders. What impact is this going to have on uh, upcoming democracies that are maybe not as developed as the US in their own interpretation of the law?
Well, we just have to live with the fact that judges are human beings. Judges interpret the law. And in interpretation of the law, they bring in their own views, their own prejudices. And there is it doesn't mean that they are wrong or that they are right. In fact, even though I agree with the Supreme Court judgment on this, if judges continue to come up with unanimous decision, in fact, I would like to think that somebody is not thinking, that some judges are not thinking. I would expect, 5-4, 7-3, and that kind of thing, because it shows that you are thinking, you are not being pushed into a corner to take a decision, or that, you are just following the crowd in the court, but that you are doing your own thinking. So I don't expect decisions of one jurisdiction, whether it's Australia, to affect the decision that is taken in Nicaragua, or that kind of thing. To me, really, as scholars, how we should be getting, or how we should confront this conundrum is really what I would have liked us to think about. Frankly, I think there are about 100 and, 80-something nations in the world. And of that 180 something, let us just say 150 claim to be democratic. How many are really democratic? How many are really democratic? They call India the greatest democracy, the largest democracy in the world. All right, they are now starting to the processes leading to their own election this year. And how many of the states in India actually are operating under very severe restrictions, whether it is, there's no doubt that Muslims in India are under very severe restrictions. Very severe restrictions. Hindus are given they have privileges which others don't have. And people will tell you that at election time, at the local level, local officials actually discriminate against Muslims. You go to other countries. I don't want us to talk about Africa because all apart from probably South Africa, South Africa and South Africa, Namibia, and there is a third country, or again in the southern part, Botswana. Apart from those three, how many really of our elections in Africa are free, fair, and if you take them not before human Supreme Court, but if you take them before the ultimate judge, how many of our elections will pass that portal into heaven? How many? We don't want to talk about the Middle East. Even in England, where constituencies, the way they are divided, they are not divided equally. Yes, you may still say one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. But in one constituency, maybe you will have 30,000 total number of voters. In another constituency, it will be maybe 45,000 number of voters. Now, is that equality of voting? So really, we've learned to accept. We've learned to accept a variegated definition of democracy that we are living with. We know it's not, they are not equal, but we've learned to live with them. I mean, the United States with its, and I mean, see how Trump defeated Mrs. Clinton because of the Electoral College. Is that democracy? Well, under their constitution, that is their democracy. But under another man's, in another country. It isn't. There are some countries where they say it must be 50% plus one for you to win the election. In other countries, 35%, you are declared winner. So really, democracy is what you would define it as and what we live by it. I think that I can see somebody's hand up, so
Absolutely,
I'm
sir.
not the only one
Say
talking.
to Harry Warigon, um, do you want to ask a question, or is that a mistake? Please unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Harry Warigon, please unmute yourself. All right, I'll go ahead. Unmute yourself, please, if you want to talk. Sir, given your comments there, then I infer that there is no universal definition of what uh, democracy really should be. Or maybe I should rephrase that. There is a universal definition, but there isn't universal application of that definition in countries. Where do we draw the line on what we do in an organization, in a company, in a country, and we say this is democratic, and therefore we should abide by the democratic principles? Where do we draw that line?
We can't. We can't. Even if you go to the beginning, how did the Greeks define democracy? Slaves were not included. Women were not included. They just started off with, the people who gathered, in the who gathered in the what do they call their whatever it is, and counted, the votes there. But gradually, again by legislation, you know, even in the United States, at the beginning, it was property owners, and then gradually, women were brought in, and then, blacks were brought in, Irish were brought in, and then you go to another country, or like in Great Britain, women were not allowed to vote at the beginning, but gradually that. So really, we've just learned to live with what, as I said, I will call the variegated nature of democracy, and we'll just have to live with that. You are never going to get to a position where all states in the world will have the same definition of democracy. You won't.
So you talked about something briefly there that I want to touch on, the fact that slaves were excluded and things like that. I don't know if you've seen it in the press. The Church of England is facing calls to establish a fund of almost £1 billion to address historical ties to slavery. And I know that some years back, the church had made available about £100 million towards this same thing. Um, what is your take on that, sir?
Well, um, No, it is 100 million pounds now. There are people who said that is rather small, that actually it should be 1 billion pounds. That would be just about right for the injury inflicted on Black people. But the final decision that was made last week is, fine, let us start with 100 million. But that 100 million, and I'm glad that the church finally, the church, in the way in which they resolved the issue, they've resolved that matter for a lot of us. And I'll tell you why. They said it's not a question of distributing, 50,000 to Bolaji Akinyemi, 100,000 to Igali, 1 million to Akin, and that kind of thing. That they will invest that 100 million in social and economic issues that affect Black people. And over the years, the money will multiply. And the church will even put in more money as time goes on. Now, that resolves the issue of to whom do we give the money? Especially these are issues that over the years have dominated the debate. How do we know who do we give the money to? And I agree with the Church of England, not because I'm a member, but at least they've shown some wisdom in this case. Now, there are other societies, other organizations that have benefited from slavery and who probably that have been confronting the complexity of this issue of compensation. And now they should be able to see their way through, because we know that Black communities everywhere in the world have suffered they've suffered they have suffered from being pushed back. They have not been able to compete because of the discrimination with white communities. And so any money that can then be put in housing, in education, in social welfare programs that will benefit and compensate the Black communities for what has happened to them in the past, I think will be justified. And nobody then will be able to say, well, to whom do we give this money to? The issue had been raised about the contribution of Africa itself to the slave trade. and that to that extent, should Africa be compensated when it contributed, our forefathers, our ancestors, sold our, brothers, our sisters, cousins, sold them into slavery. Why should them, that they've been paid off, which is not really true. I wouldn't regard people being given a mirror, a chief being given a mirror, or a bottle of gin, and he didn't really know the value of the gin. And also, this question, we've debated it. Yes, we had slavery in Africa before the Western concept of slavery came in. But the slavery in Africa was totally different. We had slaves who became kings through hard work. We had slaves to whom kings gave their daughters in marriage because they were perceived as having integrity. They didn't know that the Western concept of slavery was totally different from what, in fact, they were expecting the people to come back after some years and probably come back with, not compensation, with what they have earned. They didn't know. So that's a debate for another day. I know that there is a school of thought that said that aid that's been given to African countries should be regarded as conceptually compensation. I don't buy that, because in a way, you give with one hand, you take with another hand. If you look at the terms of trading that has taken place, let me give you an illustration. I was watching a BBC program on cocoa, the cocoa industry, Cadbury, and the entire 30 minutes program concentrated on that village in Britain where cocoa was made. Not one single reference was made to Africa, where people slaved away, where they were paid a pittance for the seeds, and where the seeds were then brought to that Cadbury village to be turned into cocoa, and then, of course, be exported to the rest of the world. Not one single reference was made to Africa. Now, that's part of what one is talking about. We didn't count. We didn't matter. They mattered. Forgetting that they never grew the cocoa. They never grew the seeds. They got them from somewhere else. And the terms of trade was unequal. So, but I think that to go back to your question, I think the Church of England has taken a reasonably good step.
To Sudan, sir. There was a report earlier on this week that
I'm so sorry. there is still one hand that is up.
No, I think that
I
must
think
be an
it's a mistake.
it's
Huh?
it must be a mistake. It
All
must be
right.
a mistake, sir. I saw that.
All right.
Yes.
Apologies.
I do have a
There are
hand.
two. There are
Uh,
two hands now.
yes. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, sir.
Well, thank you, Prof. This is Ambassador Akin Akinyemi. Thanks for your expose. I wanted to amplify further the first point on the issue of the universality of democracy across the world, universality or non-universality. I wanted to expand on that. And the second point about issue of movements in Africa, issue of social stratification. In Senegal, for instance, if you come from a goldsmith family, they are called usually the DIAs, DIA, DAs. You don't marry into that social stratification. But I want to admit, things are changing. It's the same thing in Mauritania. I don't know whether you have any views on that. But my main point, which I wanted to make on the issue of the universality of democracy, I don't know whether you still allow me to make one or two points. Yeah, is that, yes, I agree with you that even the Greek originality of democracy, I mean, is a limited population, and also the Whitehall or the Washington modes. There are universal elements of democracy about human rights, good governance, and all that. But having said that, there are people who believe that the element of African socialism comes into play, that democracy presupposes a level of development and a level of political education. And to the extent that Africa cannot wait until they attain that level of development or level of political education, it brings out some of what people like Sekuturi and the Tanzanian nationalists were postulating, that maybe what is desirable is sort of a trado democracy, a democracy that fits into the cultural mien of countries. And that explains where a country like Botswana still maintains that element of a mix of universal application and the social, the culture. So will you agree, sir, that along these lines, that democracy, we should have a sort of trado democracy, if you like, a democracy that fits into our cultural patterns. After all, even in our old Nigerian system, you have the cephalos and the acephalous states. You have stateless societies where community decisions are taken as against the powerful obis and the emirs and the obas in the West. So what are your thoughts on this, Prof? Thank you for the exposition. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. You know, in fact, to let you know how alive that debate is, President Obasanjo in the past couple of months has now himself been advocating what he well, he didn't call it a return. I, as a scholar, will call it a return to African traditional democracy. And what do I mean by a return? An African traditional community is communalism or to use the Swahili word, ndaba, was what we practiced before the Europeans came to mess up things. You know, maybe because we were small villages and small communities, everybody gathered under the tree and you debated the issue until you reached until you all agreed or there's a consensus. And in societies that were large, then you sent delegates to this ndaba, presided over by the king, where again you argued until you reached until you reach, a consensus. So we did have that. And that's what I think Obasanjo meant by saying we should, develop an African an African tradition of democracy. I will call it communalism. When I was at the Fletcher School, that was what my master's degree was on. And I must say, the kind of looks I got from my supervisor was, you mean that this is practicable? You practice this? And I said, well, I wasn't alive at that time, but I've been told that that was what we practiced, and that was what, allowed for the stability of the community. I recall one asking me, how did that fit in with the Ashanti and the Ashanti Hene? And my answer was that before the Ashanti Hene pronounced decisions, they would have gone through, it could take months, but they would have gone through debates. They would have gone through. So really, I agree with you. And I think we should go back to that. What we're practicing now is not working well. And the reason it's not working well is this. The Western concept of democracy emphasizes division. Whereas the communalism of Africa emphasizes cohesion. Why? Even when we don't have divisions. Why? Just because we must have government and opposition, we must have 2 political parties or 3 political parties or 4 political parties. Why? But that is what we have done with the Western concept that we have inherited. And, I read once, I'm not very good at remembering authors, but I read once, it could have been Ali Mazrui, that said there is no African or traditional language where the word opposition exists. That there isn't. That really, if you disagree, you are an enemy. And we've imported that into our own political system. And at least for once, I agree with President Obasanjo, that please let us find our way back to our own communalism. I've argued this with even some of the people on this platform, that I might then not argue for a one-party system, and would that not then be a dictatorship? And they may have a point, but believe me, I think I would rather have a one-party system where we all sleep and face the same direction and agree that we are going to build a road, or we are going to build cocoa or coffee and everything, and not that after 4 years somebody else comes in and says, no, we are not building a coffee, whatever it is something else we are going to do. I would prefer that we have this system where we know who our leaders are going to be, so that after Mr. A is going to be Mr. B, there will be a constancy of leadership and a constancy of program. What we are doing in Africa, we are, is messing up things.
So some people may argue that what is broken is not the way we practice, but rather the people that we put in to practice the democracy. And that if we could adjust how we put people in to practice it, then maybe the system is not as broken as we think it is. But I'm sure that this debate could go on, and I really do want to ask you about Sudan.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know if you saw the news this week, sir, that it was reported in the press in the United States that Iran had approached Sudan with an intention to have a permanent military base in Sudan. Now, Sudan has denied it, that it didn't happen. But if that were to materialize, how important is it for us? And is it something that Africa should even be considering at this point in time?
Well, you asked me a similar question last week, but it was in relationship to Turkey. And the answer I gave you, I think, is still relevant to Iran. Iran is a competitor with Saudi Arabia. And Iran has this sense of competition with the United States and the West. Iran also is a Shiite. Sorry?
Go ahead, sir.
Huh?
Go ahead, sir.
Iran is a Shiite, while Saudi Arabia is a Sunni. And that competition is there. So, as Saudi Arabia seeks to expand its own global influence, so Iran will also seek to expand its own global influence. And unfortunately for us, we are the virgin continent. where everybody can now seek areas of influence at a very cheap rate. Sudan is going to pieces, dragging. I mean, it's a pity when I read the news. I think they said 8 million Sudanese have fled Sudan since the civil war started. Some have fled to Egypt. Some have fled to Niger, to Mali, to Chad. I don't know why Nigeria is not included, because I am very sure that some of the people who are in those IDP camps in northern Nigeria, that some of them are, refugees from Sudan. It's a pity that that country is being destroyed, and that will make it amenable to offers from countries that wish to expand their influence. So I don't believe Sudan when it says it is not true. I don't believe it at all. And I can understand why Iran would want to do what it is being accused of doing.
Thank you, sir. I would stop there one so you can grab a cup of water, but at the same time, we've literally run out of time this evening. But I also do want to mention, sir, that we look forward to the launch of the Academy of International Affairs happening later on this month in Abuja. I hope you're looking forward to that, sir.
I am. At least something positive will be coming out of Nigeria. It shouldn't be just news of kidnapping of women and children and schoolgirls and so on. It will be something, well, Nigeria, and it's not because I'm a Nigerian, even though I am a Nigerian, but Nigeria has a collection of the brightest and the best in terms of, brains in whatever field you want to point to. Obviously, given my own field and the field of the people on this our platform, it will be in international relations. It will be in diplomacy. Go to the United States. There are so many. There are so many centers, so many schools of international relations, John Hopkins School. There are so many center of international studies. The United States alone probably has, I don't know how many centers. And these are specially designed so that when people retire from active diplomatic service, they don't go and vegetate. They're there to continue to contribute ideas for the benefit of the United States. Well, I don't see why Nigeria cannot do the same thing. I mean, we've had 60 years or 63 years of independence. Diplomats are now retiring in droves, and yet they are still young. Professors are retiring in droves because of the age limit, and yet the brain is still kicking. We have we have the military officers who have served creditably in peacekeeping operations under the UN, under the AU, who are still young. And we thought, let us have an academy, non-governmental. We don't owe the government anything except here are our brains. And we've been working on this for about 2 years. And finally, we are going to have a launching of the academy in about 2 weeks or so time. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm sure so are, the 35 or so of us. So as I said, among the brightest and the best in the country and in Africa. And I think that once we launch, once we've had the launching, our activities will show that we mean well for Nigeria, we mean well for Africa.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Someone has just posted a comment here. Maybe we'll take this one before we close.
Okay.
This is Afolabi Afolabi, I think. Please pardon me. I'm just going by what I can see here. I don't know who I'm calling. Political struggle that results in the victory of a candidate with 51% of the votes leads to a dictatorial governing body disguised as a false democracy. Since 49% of the electorate is ruled by an instrument of governing they did not vote for, but had imposed upon them. This is dictatorship. Page 114 of Gaddafi's book, My Vision. Not until we have a pure African democracy, the Western world will continue to take us as their slaves.
I agree. And that's what we've been talking about. Let us, IBB meant well when IBB meant well when he came up with a two-party system. I had persuaded General Murtala Mohammed for a one-party system where all of us belong in the same camp. We debate the issue together, and when we reach agreement, we go out and inform our people, this is the way we are going. And Murtala thought, he doesn't suffer fools gladly, but he thought that, I made sense in what, I have said. I couldn't persuade IBB, but he met me halfway by a two-party system. Abacha stupidly came in. He wanted to dismantle everything and anything IBB did, and then allow for 5 parties, which Bola Ige referred to as 5 leprous hands. And when General Abdul Salami came in, it was, free for all. And now we have, I don't know how many parties we have now. I served on Justice thruMYeyes panel for a review of our electoral system. And I dare say I couldn't persuade people there to even go back to IBB's two-party system. No, they wanted, let a thousand flowers bloom. But has it done us much good? I agree with Gaddafi, and I agree with, as I said, General Obasanjo, and I agree with the gentleman, Afolabi, who's just again drawn our attention. Sooner or later, the thinkers in Africa will come to realize that the Western democracy is not for our own good.
Two comments here, and sorry, sir, I keep saying the last one. It would be the last. Okay. This is from Dr. Dr. Thomas. I believe it is better for us to work on how to improve what we have now as democracy rather than begin a new experiment where we still need to look at the workability and how we conceptualize that. And there is a Dr. Hamzat who says a one-party system will be a misfit for Africa. Those would be the last 2 points, and then we close for the evening, sir.
Good. Let the debate continue.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone, this evening. We'll be back next week, and 25th. Hopefully, we'll catch some of the pictures, and maybe we could show some of that on the program after the 25th when we come back here. But we'll be back next week. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Have a lovely evening. Good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you.